As pupils across England and Wales return to school this week, many of us have been busy washing, buying and repairing school uniforms ready for the start of a new school year. One school in Cheshire has gone a bit further than others and has ordered 100 pupils into isolation for falling foul of their new uniform policy. So that leads us to ask whether, okay, you can have rules. Can you go that far in enforcing them? Parents at the high school in Northwich say the head teacher there has gone to war over the new school uniform policy, which includes the banning of trainers, shoes without a flat heel and branded sports shoes. However, parents say the punishment doesn't fit the crime and there's no wiggle room when it comes to how the rules are being applied, and they're worried that they're now going to be forced to spend more money on new shoes to prevent their child being sent out of lessons. It's not the only example of strict law enforcement in schools over uniforms. At a school in Merseyside earlier this year, female pupils staged a protest after skirt-length inspections were carried out by male teachers. You might remember that story. Meanwhile, in Hull, pupils were up in arms after being told that wearing a hair bobble on their wrist could be reason to send them home. On the other hand, many schools say, wait a minute, the strict enforcement of rules is critical to maintaining a positive learning environment. You either obey the rules if you don't, and if you don't, you're going to get punished. So what about you? Has your child been sent home for wearing the wrong uniform? Maybe you agree with the head teachers that we need these rules to maintain order. Text us 88291. Email vine@bbc.co.uk. Please include your number when you email. WhatsApp us on the long number 08000 288 291. OK, Chris McGovern is chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and an ex-head teacher. Simon Harris is a father of four. His blog is Man Behaving Dadly. Chris, you go first. You do think there's a reason for these rules?
Well, look, when a parent signs up for a school for their child, they sign up for the school rules as well. And in any school, someone is going to be in charge. It helps if it's the head teacher who've got a difficult job and they need to be supported by parents. As a head teacher myself, I have to say probably the most bohemian school in London, we had a much more relaxed attitude to uniform. And I think ideally a quiet word in the parent's ear is enough. I wouldn't want to humiliate children. So there are ways of managing it. And I never had problems over uniform.
So you have a quiet word. You don't send pupils home. You don't punish them.
No, I didn't need to. If I had a problem with the uniform, I had a quiet word. We didn't have a fetish about uniform. The thing is, I think head teachers who lack confidence feel they've got to fall back on the rules sometimes. You know, if you're confident and in a successful school, then you don't have a problem with it. You should tell the children what's necessary. Then you go and tell the parents, look, I think so-and-so stepping out of line a bit. Can you do something about it? I never found them uncooperative. They were always willing to help.
Simon Harris, what do you think?
Well, again, we're kind of we are very much in a cost of living crisis at the moment. But I mean, this goes back to before the cost of living crisis when it comes to the cost of uniform, for instance. You see the prices of some embroidered, personalised school uniform items, and you'd be forgiven for thinking they were embroidered by hand in the middle of the Amazon rainforest and then shipped over via a variety of means, the kind of prices they're charging. But I just think it's all about compromise, to be honest. I think that school uniform in itself is a good thing. I just think some of the rules, especially now with the cost of living, children being humiliated, parents, not only have they got to worry about their school ceilings caving in, they've got to worry about, oh my God, if I put my kid in the black shoes with the tiny little white specks on it by accident when I'm trying to get all four out the door in the morning, am I going to get a phone call? Is my kid going to get humiliated and punished? And again, for parents these days, it's one thing after another. And I'm quite encouraged to hear, actually, that, the quiet word is being favoured above the all guns blazing, you're in big shtuck.
Have you ever had a uniform breach with one of your kids, Simon?
It's quite a dramatic way of putting it. To be fair, I mean, again, I've not got any kids in high school yet, and I'm aware that high school is where the majority of the problems occur. So, I mean, and the great thing about our primary school, to be fair, is yes, there are embroidered items available, but, there's no kind of massive insistence upon them. For instance, if a kid's parents just go and splurge in George instead of going to the posh uniform shop a couple of towns over, it's not going to cause a big issue. Senior school, it's sometimes different because obviously of peer pressure, and somebody turns up in a slightly different shade of green, they're an outcast. But again, I'm quite fortunate that the kids are obviously in a primary school where they tend to apply a modicum of common sense.
Chris, it's hard to crack down on everyone the same way, isn't it? Because there will be pupils who are extremely disorderly but very creative, and they need to be encouraged, not made to march around all dressed the same like soldiers.
Well, you're right, and of course my school was very bohemian, produced Bombay Bicycle Club, Razorlight, Johnny Burrell, Bob Geldof used to come to our rock concerts, Anthony Gormley was a pupil.
There we go.
David Seuss.
There
so
we go.
We were very bohemian. But, you know, the uniform is in many ways a great leveler. What I would say, and I have great sympathy for your other guests, what I would say is that some schools, and I don't approve of this at all, they have expensive uniforms as a way of sorting out their catchment. What they do is have an expensive uniform, so poor parents can't afford the uniform, therefore they can't choose that school. And I know that some schools get commissions from the uniform provider. So there's a whole story here to look at. But essentially, yes, school uniform is a good thing. It should be a great leveler. It shouldn't be a means of discriminating between those who can afford it and those who can't. But I always go along. Schools are like families. You need to work with parents. And parents need to respect head teachers. They need to hang together.
Simon, looking at the story from a distance in Cheshire, this ordering of 100 pupils into isolation because they didn't wear the right uniform, can you think of any reason why that would be justified?
I don't, to be honest. It just sounds like a slightly balmy sledgehammer to crack a nut approach. I mean, the issue is that sometimes when these stories do hit the media, and this is where I sympathise with head teachers and teaching staff, sometimes when the stories do hit the media about this kind of thing, they get kind of not elaborated, but they just get overly dramatised over and over again to the extent where it's almost like the parents are the ones screaming about it, and then it's the school that have to kind of deal with the press when they perhaps don't want to, and they just try and fight fires in that sense. So I'm probably aware that it happened, but again, I really can't see any reason to justify it happening in the form that it happened up at that other school you were talking about.
Thank you very much, Simon Harris, father of four. His blog is Man Behaving Dadly. Chris McGovern, chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and an ex-head teacher, talking about how far a school can go in ensuring that pupils stick to its uniform policy.